This video goes over some leaked information, including Nicole's kit and one of the artifact sets coming out next version, so watch it at your own risk. Alright, it's been 3 weeks since I made a video, I gotta refine my voice. Hello, and welcome to a video about Emilie that I hope will be short, but we all know it's gonna go long. When Emilie first came out, she was a pretty powerful unit, and I think throughout Natland she maintained her relevance pretty well while getting not very many upscales. Now this year, with Nod Cry, the power creep has gotten a little bit worse, but in return, Emilie's gotten even more tools to keep up with everything going on, and she's getting a rerun on the Chronicled banner right before she gets another big increase, so what better time to talk about her? If you want a more detailed guide about what Emilie does, my 101 is still up to date. I still think it's a good video, you can go and check that out. This video is all about the new tools that she got this year and how she can go about utilizing them. I don't really have any more preamble, so let's just get into it. Most obviously, the first piece we got was durin. Emilie is an off-field damage dealer who, to deal her damage, wants burning to be triggered. Obviously that means you want pyro application, and additionally you want buffs so that Emilie can deal more of her damage. And would you believe it, durin provides those exact two things. Of course his burst has two forms, but we're going to be ignoring dark form today in favor of light form, because that's where all of his buffs are. In any case, this burst applies pyro off field, deals damage, and if you trigger pyro reactions with either electro, animo, geo, or dendro, durin will shred res for both pyro and whatever other element was involved in the reaction. Burning gets you dendro shred, overloaded gets you electro shred, so on so on. While previously you could just get a unit like and put her on Deepwood to consolidate your pyro applier and your res shredder, durin provides a pretty decent increase for three main reasons. Number one, he has pretty significant personal damage of his own. Having significant personal damage isn't completely unique to him. Mawika obviously exists, and to a lesser extent we also have Xiangling. Both of them can be reasonable Deepwood holders while also contributing some team damage, but burning teams don't often provide good setups for Mawika and Xiangling to do particularly good damage. And while durin also doesn't get to do any reactions or anything like that to increase his damage, he does at least shred res for himself, giving him a bit of a higher baseline than either Mawika or Xiangling. The second thing durin provides is that he is a hex unit. This enables you to run other hex units that would otherwise not be enabled by a unit like Mawika or Xiangling, and Emilie does have a fair few teams that make good use of a second hex unit. Actually, this one right here, this is not Kinich's premium team, this is no longer his highest sheeting team. I'll get into why later, but durin being in this slot enables Albedo to be run in this slot, and Albedo does enough personal damage and minor buffing that he becomes better than any C6 4-star or C0 5-star in the slot. Should you pull Albedo for Kinich? No, we're gonna get into that. But this is an example of durin enabling a team option that otherwise would not be usable because Albedo basically doesn't have a kit outside of double hex. Yes, it sucks, yes, I'm mad about it. Anyways, feature number 3, we have a nice segue as it relates to the hex passive. By default, durin's light form burst only shreds 20% res. Including a second hex unit in the team increases that 20% to 35%, which already is more than the 30% that Deepwood provides. But on top of that, durin can achieve even higher res shred and more offensive value by just equipping Deepwood himself. So Emilie wants to have pyro application in the team and wants to deal a lot of damage. Durin provides that application while also giving her a little bit of buffing, and he can even end up dealing a fair amount of damage of his own. And it actually does kind of work both ways. Mostly durin is good for Emilie, but on occasion, because of how the burning reaction works, Emilie can be good for durin. Say in a team like this, yes, we get Fischl, she can snapshot Bennett's buff, she can deal a lot of damage of her own, she can activate her hex buff and give an additional 45% attack to Venti, all good stuff, but Fischl at C6 applies a lot of electro, and durin specifically asks that you are doing pyro reactions. Burning and overloaded, obviously, those are pyro exclusive reactions, but when it comes to swirls or crystallizes, durin asks that you specifically trigger a pyro swirl and pyro crystallize. With how much electro Fischl applies, it can be very easy for her to overtake, and then Venti gets an electro absorption, and you stop getting pyro swirls altogether, losing your animo res shred. red. In contrast, burning doesn't remove any pyro, in fact it creates more. She can act as a stabilizer and get you all the correct reactions, and therefore all of the correct res shred. Now, I don't want to oversell him. Durin is still not a massive increase for Emilie. I'd argue that the second unit I'm going to talk about today should be your priority if you're trying to get units specifically to buff Emilie. And I thought I had more to say, but I don't, so I'm going to stop beating around the bush. Let's talk about that second character. Nicole. Going over the basic details of her kit, Nicole is a pyrohexerai unit, and her skill creates a shield and grants a full party attack buff based on her own attack, very similar to Eon-san. It doesn't have that whole you have to stay moving clause as Eon-san does, it just is an attack buff that is based on her entire total attack, so you will be needing to build attack on her for her to buff substantial attack. And that is basically all that you need to know that Nicole is going to be a pretty decent Emilie upscale. Emilie was a unit designed in Fontaine when we didn't have full party attack buffers, and her numbers were balanced with that in mind. She gets better scalings than on-field units because it is assumed that she is not going to be getting as many buffs as an on-field unit, so she needs better base scaling to be able to deal reasonable damage. But now, 2 years down the line, we are getting that full party attack buffer, and not only are we getting that full party attack buffer, but she also has further synergy with Durin. Real quick, I do want to set expectations properly. Nicole is not a stupid, busted, broken, unbalanced unit that makes the game unfun to play. She actually is balanced around the existence of Bennett. She ends up buffing your on-fielder's attack slightly less than Bennett does, but in return, she has much better quality of life because she has a shield, her attack buff isn't circle impacted, and her attack buff is on skill instead of burst. And also, she gives any attack buff at all to the rest of your team, which Bennett obviously doesn't do. In any case, not only does Nicole provide a full party attack buff and get Emilie dealing more damage that way, but her being a pyro unit enables pyro resonance with Durin, which is another full party attack buff. And her being a hex unit enables both of their hex synergies. For Durin, it's that extra 15% res shred, bringing him from 20% shred to 35. Not a massive increase, but definitely meaningful. For Nicole, double hex is a little bit less meaningful, because her double hex passive actually also requires that you are using a hex on-fielder. Even if you on-field Emilie, you can't make use of it because Emilie's not a hex unit. But who knows if that's gonna stay as is. The more important thing that double hex enables for Nicole is her artifact set. Yeah, let's talk about that because we're getting a new artifact set that is meant to be a supportive hexerai set. You can sort of think of it like a hex scroll set. It is meaningfully different, and it is going to be a little bit harder to get value on Emilie out of it because it essentially reads like this. If you put it on a hex unit, if you don't have Hex Secret right, so if you only have one Hex unit in the team, using their skill will grant a full party damage bonus buff of the equipper's elemental type. That damage bonus is only 20%, but if you include a second Hex unit in your team, the passive becomes meaningfully better. Not only does it upgrade the 20% damage bonus to 40% damage bonus, but you get an additional 40% full party damage bonus for the element of your on-fielder. That's right, the set actively tracks the element of your on-fielder and will provide a full party buff based on whatever that is. So why is it difficult to make use of this artifact set on Emilie? Well, she's an off-fielder, and the set only checks the element of your on-fielder. So if you're using her off-field, the only way to get any value out of this set is to either have a Dendro character equipping it, which right now is not possible because it needs to be on a Hex character, and we do not have a Dendro Hex character. That could change in the future, but I still wouldn't hold my breath. Or you can use a Dendro on-fielder. Pretty much the only Dendro on-fielder that you ever want to run in an Emilie team is Kinich. Burning can be a pretty useful reaction to a wide variety of units, and that's why you're able to run Emilie in so many teams. It can be useful in securing melts or vaporizes. It can be useful for getting extra reaction damage out of an electro carry who wants Dendro. In fact, that's another thing that Durin has done. Durin has actually done a particularly large amount for these overburn teams where you're triggering aggravates, spreads, and burning. But for all these other archetypes, Emilie isn't able to get any use out of this new set. Like in this team, if I put the new supportive set on Durin, I'd be getting 40% pyro damage bonus and 40% electro damage bonus. This isn't a massive issue because most people end up primarily playing Emilie with kinich. But for people who play a much wider variety of teams, just note that Emilie is probably going to have a harder time getting any additional value out of this hex set. In any case, there is a second solution to this problem. You could just run Emilie as the on-fielder herself. Yeah, not only did Durin provide a pretty large increase to Emilie's off-field teams, which will only further be boosted by Nicole, he also gave her a pretty good on-field team. Through the implementation of Fischl's buffs, stapling some good simple res shred and a little bit of attack buffing to 2 units that deal a pretty significant amount of damage, turns out pretty good. This is a pretty simple team, not really much to say about it. Just some damage dealers and some buffers that have decent synergy with Emilie that let her stand on field, catch a bunch of buffs, do a lot of damage. I currently have Deepwood on Durin, Fischl is on a damaging build, but once the hex set comes out, I probably will end up replacing Fischl's damaging build for the supportive set. Will that impact team damage negatively? Maybe. Do I care? No, because it's going to make Emilie's damage higher. Funnily enough, this will be a team that won't be improved by Nicole because she's a well-designed character that won't just power creep everything and make the game boring. Because Fischl is able to snapshot, she's able to keep Bennett's larger attack buff. So I'd be sacrificing an attack buff on both Emilie and Fischl just to get some more attack on Durin. Additionally, Bennett C6 giving a Pyro Infusion lets Emilie deal a good amount more damage, lets her get better uptime on her burning. C6 Bennett definitely isn't a big deal, and this team isn't reliant on it, but it's a nice extra bonus that Nicole doesn't have. In teams where Emilie is an off-fielder, Nicole is pretty much always better.
This'll brighten up the place.
I'm going to take a moment to talk a little bit more in depth about the kinich team. Kinich teams are actually going to be one of the teams that benefit the most from this upcoming patch. Already, kinich has a lot of damage coming from off-fielders in his team. To look at a sort of similar unit, we can talk about why Albedo is his current best in slot. Albedo is another off-field damage dealer who got a lot more compelling damage since his hex buffs. So he brings his own personal damage, he doesn't mess with the burning reaction going on in the team, so kinich easily has full burning uptime and can get 5 cannons. And what really makes him pull ever so slightly ahead is that he also gets a full party damage bonus buff. It maxes out at 42% for hex units, including Albedo himself, but only gets to a mere 12% for all your other units. Now I did just say a mere 12%, but 12%, that's not bad. It's not crazy, it's nothing great, but it's also not bad. Given that so much of the team's damage is coming from Emilie and now Durin, Albedo doing his own damage and providing that 12% buff to both kinich and Emilie makes him better than any unit that would be solely dedicated to buffing kinich. Just to finish making my point, I'd like to show you the full damage breakdown of this team. I'm also gonna cheat with infinite energy. Nah, I didn't get my 5 skill. Whatever, I'll get 5 skill this rotation. God damn it, I missed it again. There we go. Okay. we can stop it there. Now, I don't want you to take these numbers as gospel. This only gives you a general idea of how much damage the team will do, but the exact numbers reflect the investment on my account. I don't have a particularly good kinich build. I'd like to get it a little bit better, and as you could see, my play was not perfect. I only got 5 cannons in 2 rotations out of 4. In comparison, my albedo build is absolutely incredible, and I have a C1 albedo. My Emilie build is also quite good, and I also have a durin signature, which does increase his own damage a little bit, but also gives an attack buff to your onfielder. All of those factors shift around my exact damage contribution, but regardless, you can see all the numbers are pretty close. 33% from kinich, 21 from albedo, 29 from Emilie, 17 from durin. Kinich does not get the vast majority of damage in his team. He doesn't even break 50% contribution, which that's not like a good or a bad thing, it's just a thing. I feel like I should ban the word fraud from my comment section. Nicole isn't going to bring the same personal damage to the team that albedo has, but her and the Hex Artifact set are going to bring a lot more buffing to every single unit on the team. Kinich, Emilie, and durin are all attack scaling. They're all going to be getting significant attack buffs. They're all going to be getting 40% damage bonus. And even if Nicole wasn't going to provide a numerical increase to Kinich teams, she still is going to provide a lot of quality of life. Like I said before, part of her power is in her quality of life. She gives a full party attack buff that is not restricted by circle impact, and she gives a shield for interruption resist and defense. Currently, Kinich teams are definitely struggling to include good damaging options and good defensive options, and Nicole is going to provide both. And of course, Nicole wouldn't be nearly as good as she is for Kinich teams if it weren't for Emilie dealing so much of the team's damage. There are some other teams that I'm excited to play, like Risley Burn Melt. That's going to be another team that gets a pretty significant leg up from Nicole, but most of those teams all play the same, so I'm not going to bore you with all the details. At least not before Nicole comes out. I think that's pretty much everything. I kind of wanted to keep this video a little bit short. So that's the long and short of it. Emilie was a pretty solid unit throughout Natlan, and she only began to fall off throughout Nod Cry. But then Nod Cry gave her a bunch of extra pieces to lift her up even higher than she had ever been before. I would like to thank my channel members for sticking with me through this time of lower video production. Najodo, Rumpalta, ZaxyDR, Mudkip1727, Beef Potato, Roberto Desu, Big Soup, Buffalo Milk, DB, Bab, TSI Amat, Maho Shoujo Ruru, Smooty, Starnova, Pop Roxy, Tede Rose, Tylee, and Aqua. Thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you learned something. Have a lovely day.